You're at your kitchen table on a Wednesday night, laptop open to nothing in particular, when a notification buzzes through. A LinkedIn update. Someone from your old team just got promoted to a title 2 levels above where you sit right now. You know the work behind that title. You did some of it yourself, quietly, for someone else's name to end up on the announcement. You close the laptop without reading the comments. Nobody tells you the people who quietly disappear from a job weren't the ones who stopped caring. They were the ones who finally did the math. And by the time they hand in the 2-line resignation letter, the actual decision was made months earlier, somewhere nobody could see it. Because the thing that changed first was never on any dashboard the company could read. You're about to walk through the 3 stages that happen before someone leaves, and this time you're going to look at it through the one lens almost nobody uses: the money. Because underneath every quiet resignation is a number somebody finally calculated, and once you see the number, the whole thing stops looking like burnout and starts looking like a plan. Stage 1. You start reading the paycheck instead of just cashing it. There's a woman I'll call Priscilla Odom, a claim supervisor. 7 years in, the person new hires get told to just go ask. For most of those 7 years, she never questioned the arithmetic. The check landed every other Friday. The number went up a little every January, and that felt like enough. Then one Tuesday in March, something small happened. Her manager, a guy named Wes Calloway, mentioned in a meeting that the team had saved the department $340,000 this year through a process Priscilla had personally redesigned. Wes got a director title out of it. Priscilla got a 2.5% raise, $57,000 becoming $58,425. Nothing about her output changed that week. She still closed every file on time. What changed was quieter than that. She went home and, for the first time in 7 years, actually opened the calculator app instead of just glancing at the deposit total. $58,425 a year is $28.09 an hour before taxes for someone who built a process worth over 100 times her own raise. She sat with that number for a long time on her couch that night. Not angry exactly, more like someone recalculating a route they'd been driving on autopilot for years. She almost talked herself out of the feeling the next morning. That's the normal move, she knew. Brush past it, credit the coffee, get back to the inbox. But the number didn't fade the way a bad mood usually does by Wednesday. It just sat there, quietly correct, waiting for her to do something with it, or nothing at all. She chose, without really deciding to keep it. She wrote $340,000 and $1,425 on the same sticky note and stuck it inside a kitchen drawer she rarely opened. Less a plan than a fact she wasn't ready to lose track of. This is what stage 1 actually is. Not a mood, a recalculation. Priscilla started keeping a private number in her head that Wes and the company would never see. The gap between what she was worth on paper and what she was actually being paid for it. Once you calculated that gap once, you cannot uncalculate it. The office looks the same. The badge still works on the same door. But you're reading the paycheck differently now. The way you'd reread a lease after finding out the landlord lied about the deposit terms. Here's how you know you're standing where Priscilla was. You've started doing quiet math that has nothing to do with your job description, what you'd be paid somewhere else, what the company actually made off something you built, what your hour is worth compared to what your hour is paid. Most people never name this stage. They just feel a low, specific irritation they can't quite locate and assume something's wrong with them. It isn't. It's the first honest accounting they've done in years. It's not always a single number that does it either. Sometimes it's smaller and stranger than that. Priscilla mentioned to a friend once months later that part of what tipped her over wasn't even the $340,000 figure directly. It was watching Wes's new title get announced in the all-company newsletter with a photo and a paragraph, while the process itself, the actual thing that made the number real, went unmentioned entirely. It wasn't the money alone, it was the specific experience of watching credit travel upward while the work stayed exactly where it had always been. That's a distinction worth sitting with, because plenty of people who never do the exact dollar math still hit stage 1 the moment they notice credit and effort pointing in 2 different directions inside the same building. Stage 2. The extra leaves quietly and the paycheck doesn't notice. This is a stage that fools everyone, including the person going through it. Because here's the trap. A salary only measures one thing: whether you did the job. It has no line item for the emails you used to send at 9 p.m. because you cared. The idea you used to bring to the Monday meeting before anyone asked for it. None of that was ever on the pay stub, which means all of it can leave the building without a single number moving. Priscilla's paycheck stayed exactly $58,425 for the next 11 months. Her review that spring said exceeds expectations, the same phrase it said the year before. What actually left wasn't visible on either document. She stopped bringing the extra idea to Monday's meeting. She stopped answering Wes's Sunday night emails until Monday morning, on purpose, for the first time in 7 years. She started doing precisely the job, exactly the hours, nothing more, and telling herself it was boundaries. Sometimes that's true, but underneath it, something more specific was happening. She'd started asking a different question before every extra thing she used to do for free. Does this get me $1 closer to what I'm actually worth, or does it just make Wes's numbers look better? Her coworker, a guy named Deshaun Pretty, noticed the shift before she did. "You used to be the one pushing for the new intake system," he said at lunch one day, not unkindly, more curious than anything. She didn't have a clean answer for him. She just said she was tired, which was true, but not for the reason he assumed. She wasn't tired of the work. She was tired of doing $340,000 worth of it for a $1,425 raise. There was a specific Thursday about 4 months into the stage when the old version of her would have stayed late fixing a reporting error 2 other departments had caused. She noticed herself packing up at 5:01 instead, watching the error sit there unresolved until morning, and she waited for the guilt to show up the way it always had. It didn't, really. Just a small flicker that faded by the elevator. That absence of guilt told her more than the sticky note in the drawer ever had. Here's the number underneath stage 2 that almost nobody calculates but should. If Priscilla had spent even 4 extra hours a week for a year on that unpaid discretionary effort at what her actual market value turned out to be once she checked, that's over 200 hours a year handed to a company that gave back roughly $6.68 an hour in raise terms. Once you run that math once, you stop being able to unsee it, and the extra hours simply stop showing up. Quietly, with no announcement, no confrontation, no dramatic meeting. The dashboard stays green because the dashboard was never built to measure the thing that actually left. It's worth pausing here on why it's almost always the sharp ones who hit this stage first, not the people doing the worst work, the people doing the best work. Priscilla could see the $340,000 number because she was the one who built the process that produced it. Someone coasting through the same job would never have run into that specific arithmetic because they never generated the number in the first place. The better you are at a job, the more visible the gap becomes between what you generate and what you're paid for generating it. Competence is what hands you the calculator. That's the part almost no manager wants to hear, because it means the withdrawal isn't a performance problem. It's a byproduct of exactly the performance they were counting on. Not everyone at stage 2 moves to stage 3, and it's worth seeing what staying looks like because it's the far more common outcome. A woman 2 cubicles down from Priscilla, a claims processor named Marisol Vance, hit her own version of stage 2 almost 4 years before Priscilla did, after training a manager who'd started 6 months after her. Marisol never opened the notebook. She just got quieter, year over year, doing exactly the job and nothing more. The same complaint at the same Friday happy hour every few months. The same "one day I'm just gonna walk in and quit" joke that everyone laughed at because everyone recognized it. 6 years later, Marisol's still there, still doing exactly the job, still telling the same joke. Nothing about her situation is dramatic or tragic, it's just frozen. The withdrawal without the redirection. Energy pulled back from a company that never earned it and never given anywhere else to go instead. That's the actual risk of stage 2. Not that you'll feel bad, but that you'll simply stay there, comfortable enough to never build the plan, resentful enough to never fully re-engage. Wes, for what it's worth, genuinely believed Priscilla was doing fine that whole 11-month stretch. He mentioned to another director once, months after she'd left, that the department's numbers never dipped, so he'd assumed morale was fine too. The same mistake nearly every manager makes with nearly every Priscilla they'll ever have. He was watching the only bucket his own dashboard could see: contracted work, deadlines, the green checkmark. He had no equivalent gauge for the Sunday night email that stopped coming, the extra idea that stopped showing up at Monday's meeting because nobody had ever built him one. It isn't that Wes didn't care. In his own limited way, he clearly did, telling her she'd be missed and meaning it. It's that the entire measurement system he'd been handed was built to track exactly one bucket and completely blind to the other, which meant the actual warning signs of her leaving were sitting in plain sight for over a year and simply never once appeared on anything he was trained to look at. This is worth knowing whichever side of the desk you happen to be sitting on right now. If you manage people, the quiet ones who used to push back in meetings and don't anymore aren't necessarily fine just because their numbers are fine. If you're the one going quiet, the fact that nobody's noticed isn't proof that nothing's happening. It's proof the system was never built to notice the thing that actually changed first. Stage 3. The withdrawn hours get a destination. Most people get stuck at stage 2 for years, quietly doing the minimum, quietly resentful, waiting for the company to notice and fix something it was never built to notice. That's not the bottom of anything. That's a ledge people fall asleep on for a decade. Stage 3 is different, and it starts with one shift in how Priscilla saw Wes entirely. She stopped taking any of it personally. Wes wasn't a villain, he was scared, protecting a director title he'd gotten partly off her work, managing his own fear of being the next name cut whenever the department found efficiencies again. None of it had ever really been about Priscilla. It was other people managing their own anxiety. And once she saw that clearly, something in her chest actually unclenched. But here's the part that separates the people who just complain in the break room from the people who actually leave on their own terms. She didn't let the 4 hours a week she'd stopped giving to Wes just evaporate into extra Netflix. She redirected every one of them onto a notebook she started keeping in her nightstand. And the notebook had exactly 4 numbers in it. The first number was runway. She sat down on a Sunday afternoon with 3 months of bank statements spread across the table and calculated her actual monthly expenses, rent, insurance, groceries, the whole picture, and landed on $2,380. 6 months of that is $14,280. She had $3,100 saved at the time she started the notebook, mostly by accident, left over from a bonus 2 years back she'd never gotten around to spending. Not a vibe, a number with a gap she could actually measure and close. $180 a week for roughly 15 months to close it. She set up the transfer that same Sunday, before dinner, before she could talk herself into waiting for a better month to start. The second number was a skill. She'd noticed, doing the intake redesign that made Wes a director, that she genuinely liked the system side of the work more than the supervising side. The actual building of the thing rather than the managing of people building it. She started a certificate in process automation on her own time, 90 minutes most weeknights after dinner. $1,200 for the program total, paid in 3 installments she budgeted for out of the same paycheck Wes still controlled. Some nights she didn't want to open the laptop again after a full day of Wes's meetings. She did it anyway, not out of discipline exactly, more because the 90 minutes felt like the only part of her day that belonged entirely to her. There was a module about 6 weeks in, on workflow mapping, that covered almost exactly the redesign she'd already built for Wes's department for free. Except this time, the course walked her through pricing that same kind of work like a consultant would, by project scope instead of by salary. She sat with that for a while after finishing the module. The specific discomfort of realizing the exact skill she'd been paid a 2.5% raise for was, framed correctly, worth a rate that made her old hourly number look almost embarrassing. She didn't quit the next morning, she just kept going to class, 90 minutes at a time, and let the number sit there doing its work quietly, the same way the runway transfer did every week without announcing itself. The third number was a name. One person a month outside her company entirely, added deliberately to a list she kept on the second page of the same notebook. A former coworker who'd moved to a software vendor 2 years earlier. A woman from a professional association meetup she almost skipped because she was tired on a Wednesday, and went anyway, mostly out of stubbornness. A cousin's husband who ran operations at a mid-sized logistics company 2 states over. Someone she'd exchanged maybe 40 words with at a holiday dinner before that year. 9 months in, that list had 11 names on it, and one of them, the vendor coworker, forwarded her a job posting before it was ever publicly listed, attaching one line, "Thought of you the second I saw this." The meetup was the one she almost didn't go to, and it's worth sitting on why. She'd had a long week. Wes had moved the deadline up twice in 3 days, and the version of her a year ago would have used exactly that excuse to stay home guilt-free. Stage 3 Priscilla went anyway. Sat through 40 minutes of a panel discussion she found only mildly interesting, and spent the last 20 minutes of the mixer talking to exactly one person, a woman 2 name tags down who worked in vendor relations at a software company Priscilla had never heard of. They didn't exchange anything more substantial than a business card and a mutual complaint about the venue's parking. She almost didn't follow up afterwards either. She did. A short email 2 days later, nothing clever in it, just a genuine thank you for a comment the woman had made during the panel. That's the entire origin of the connection that eventually forwarded her the job posting. Nothing about it looked like networking while it was happening. It looked like being slightly too polite to skip a follow-up email. The fourth number wasn't the dollar figure at all. It was a short list of words she started scoring her actual months against instead of her performance review. Freedom, fair pay, and enough time left in the evening to feel like a person. Some months scored low, particularly the ones where Wes's department went through another reorg scare. She wrote that down too, without spiraling over it, just as data, the same way she'd log a bad quarter in a spreadsheet without deciding it meant the whole year was ruined. Here's what almost everyone gets backwards about a stage 3 person. Leadership reads the quiet as decline, burned out, checked out, lost the drive. It's the opposite. Priscilla was more awake at stage 3 than she'd been in years. The energy never disappeared. It just stopped being untraceable. Every hour that used to vanish into Wes's Sunday night inbox for free was now compounding somewhere with her name on it instead of his. 14 months after that Tuesday meeting where Wes got the director title, Priscilla put in a 2-week notice for a systems role at the vendor company her old coworker worked for, $71,000 to start, a number that would have sounded impossible to the version of her sitting on the couch doing that first calculator app math. Wes told a colleague afterward that he didn't see it coming. Deshaun wasn't surprised at all. He'd watched the extra quietly leave the building for over a year. He just hadn't known there was a notebook attached to where it went. Her last week, she trained her replacement without any resentment left in it, the kind of clean handoff that only comes from someone who's already mentally moved 3 states away. Wes shook her hand on the last day and told her she'd be missed, and meant it, which was its own strange feeling, knowing the sentiment was probably true and had never once translated into anything on a pay stub. A year and a half after she started at the vendor company, Priscilla ran into an old college friend, a man named Curtis Aldine, at a mutual friend's engagement party. Curtis had gone through his own version of this exact curve 4 years earlier at a different company, in a different industry entirely, freight logistics instead of insurance claims. He'd kept the same kind of notebook, he told her, laughing about it a little, half embarrassed the way people get about habits that actually worked. His runway number was $19,000. His skill was a logistics certification he'd finished during a slow winter. His name-a-month list had led eventually to the operations role he's in now, one that paid nearly double what he'd made the year he started the notebook. Neither of them had known the other was doing this in parallel, years apart, in industries that had nothing to do with each other. It made the whole thing feel less like a personal quirk and more like something closer to a pattern, one that works quietly regardless of what the org chart actually says on it. So here's how you'd actually start this yourself this week without any of the drama of a 2-line resignation letter attached to it yet. For the runway number, you don't need a financial planner or a spreadsheet template you found online at midnight. You need 3 months of actual bank statements and 45 honest minutes. Rent, insurance, groceries, gas, the minimum on anything you're carrying a balance on. Add it up, multiply by 6. That's the number. Then look at what you currently have saved toward it, subtract, and divide the gap by however many weeks you're willing to give yourself to close it. Priscilla's was $180 a week for 15 months. Yours might be smaller or larger. The size doesn't matter nearly as much as the fact that it now exists as a number instead of a worry. For the skill, the test isn't what sounds impressive on a resume. It's what you are already good at inside your current job that the job itself never fully let you specialize in. Priscilla didn't learn something totally foreign. She leaned into the system side of a role that had buried that talent under supervisory duties. Look at the parts of your own job you're best at and quietly resent not getting to do more of. That's usually where the actual marketable skill is hiding, half built already, waiting for deliberate hours instead of stolen ones. For the name, the bar is lower than it feels. It doesn't have to be a networking event or an awkward, cold LinkedIn message. It can be replying properly to an old coworker's update instead of just liking it. It can be the cousin's husband at the holiday dinner you'd normally give 40 words to. The only rule is that they can't work at your current company, because the entire point is building a version of your professional life that doesn't live entirely inside one building's org chart. And for the fourth number, the one that isn't a dollar figure, pick 3 to 5 words that actually describe the life you're trying to build, not the ones you think you're supposed to pick. Freedom meant something specific to Priscilla, evenings that felt like her own. It might mean something different to you. Proximity to family, creative control, simply not dreading Sunday nights. Score your actual months against those words instead of whatever your next performance review says, and you'll start noticing, the same way Priscilla did, which months are actually working and which ones just look fine from the outside. You don't need a Wes or a $340,000 process to run this same math on your own Tuesday. The 4 numbers are the whole exit plan, and you can start any one of them tonight without quitting anything tomorrow. Your runway number, the exact figure, not a feeling. 1 skill built on your own clock that makes you worth more outside the building than in it. 1 name a month added to a list that has nothing to do with your current org chart, and a short list of words that score your actual life instead of your next review. None of these 4 things require you to already know your exit. Priscilla didn't know, the Sunday she calculated $2,380 in monthly expenses, that she'd end up at a vendor company 14 months later. She just knew the number, and having the number turned out to matter more than having the destination. The runway is what let her say yes to the system certificate instead of a second Netflix subscription. The certificate is what made the vendor coworker think of her the second the posting went up. The posting is what turned 14 months of quiet Sunday nights into a 2-week notice that looked sudden to absolutely everyone except her. If you're looking for the one place to start tonight, start with the number, not the notebook itself, not the skill, not the list. Open your bank statements the way Priscilla did on that Sunday afternoon and just find out what 6 months of your actual life costs. Most people have never done that math either, and it's the one number that turns every other decision on this list from a maybe into a maybe test by Tuesday. If you've noticed yourself doing quiet math lately, checking what you'd be worth somewhere else, pulling back the extra hour you used to give away for free, you're not imagining it, and you're not failing at your job. You're standing exactly where Priscilla stood, at the top of a completely normal curve. The only real question is whether you let it happen to you for the next 5 years, or whether you open the notebook tonight and start closing the gap on your own schedule instead of the company's. Subscribe if you want the next one, and I'll see you there.